Yes. Oh my gosh. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mindful Constitution podcast. I'm super excited to be here with my doula, Marguerite Cogliano, today. And we're going to be diving into my birth story, which I thought would be really fun to talk about, specifically with my doula, who was there for every moment of it. So, hello, Marguerite. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to get to relive this and talk about the experience with you.
Yeah, relive it. I can't wait either, Can't get enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Marguerite was obviously my doula, so she spent the whole day with us through the birth experience. But before we dive into like specifically my little story, I wanted to just talk about what a doula is for anybody who doesn't know and how they can be beneficial. And also, like, how you got into it specifically and what kind of inspired you to get trained as a doula. So, start with telling me, how do you explain what a doula is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone who
Thank
doesn't
you.
know.
So, first, I guess for a more technical definition, we could go with honestly just continuous emotional and physical support for mom and birthing partner before, during, and even after the birthing experience. When people ask me, kind of, what do you do? I like to say I bring the vibe and just help be a voice. And really, that voice of support can be really important. When you're in the heat of the moment, you might be a little tired, or this might be, your first time doing something. So it's one of those, you don't know what you don't know type of situations. And I feel like the point of really having that doula is to just help guide you, through those different milestones, or through the event itself. And oddly enough, so I want to say back in 2018, I was at a point in my life where I'd been working for an incredible company. I want to say I was 6 or 7 years in at that point, and I felt like my life was just very transactional, and I was kind of just searching for something different, a way that I could be of service to others. I feel like I really fit into that caretaker archetype, and I love kids. I love just helping people, and again, just really being that support. And one of my friends had actually encouraged me. She said, I feel like you'd be really good as a doula. Have you ever thought of that? And I was like, do what? And she kind of really just inspired me to get on that path. And flash forward, um, maybe to 2020, I had acted as an officiant in my friend's wedding. And one of my best friends from college, and her joke was, I want you to be with me through every milestone. So when she and her husband got pregnant, she called me and she said, all right, I hope you're serious about that doula thing, because we're going to have a baby and we want you to be our doula. And at that point, I really got into researching and studying, and here we are now.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. It's always neat when people see qualities in you before you see them in yourself and they, say, "Oh, you would be really good at this," and kind of usher you into
Yeah.
that role. Like how cool is that? Yeah, I definitely felt inspired to ask you to be my doula just from our relationship and connection over holistic health and having a lot of the kind of same opinions about
Mhm.
holistic health and how to take care of ourselves. And I had done a lot of research too about how doulas can really be supportive in low intervention births and
Mhm.
kind of helping you successfully execute a lot of like the statistics, whatever statistics say. But a lot of them say, that doulas really do reduce the numbers of interventions just by having that support system there, that
Yeah.
emotional support, like you said. And bringing the vibe is exactly how I would say you supported me too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love too that I feel like the time in life when we really reconnected was um it was before you guys got pregnant too. And I remember we had been talking about one of the other births that I was going to be attending or had just attended. And um I was really excited because I mean, you were really interested in it and you were like, if when we have a baby, maybe like you'll be my doula. And I was like, yeah, definitely. Like I love it so much because like you hit the nail on the head with a lot of just the holistic approach to personal wellness and wellness, and even just bringing more of that like celebration back to like different events. I feel like for mom and particularly for dad too, I feel like really like one of the unsung heroes of a birth itself is that other support, doula, dad, mom, whatever that person is, but just that person who is there to hold space for you while going through the birthing process. And I love getting to support that person too, because I feel like that's something that we don't really talk about that much,
Yeah.
right? It's like obviously, mom's in it, and having an additional person who might have been through it, or whatever, just has that other information, but she's sitting there with someone who's also going through this crazy transformation, and we don't really talk about that. And I love getting to participate in that with just both perspectives, both people. And I think for us having that connection, even from when we were kids, I mean, what we played high school lacrosse
Lacrosse.
together. Yeah. So I
You're
think
the goalie.
I was a goalie. So that was, I mean, I was 13 or 14 when we met. Right. And then we're, in our early 30s when we reconnected. So it's really special to just get to like get in touch with each other as we're on these different, paths, and how, something like health really reconnected us later in life.
Right. Yeah. And kind of almost the pandemic in a way too, I think, just talking about that and um going through like that period together as well. And and also as a side note, you grew up with John too, which is unique because you knew both of us from you knew him longer than me because
Yeah.
you two went to elementary school together. So pretty cool that you were able to sit in on the birth with two people that you knew growing up, but
Yeah, I mean, like how cool is that? So background there. I mean, I met John when I was 8, and he was 9, so he was a year ahead of me. He was in my brother's class, and we used to play manhunt together, Oak Bluffs kids, and
yeah,
yeah, it was really like just really cool. Like we know each other from the past, we know each other from now, and really getting to be there at that turning point. Like I like to say, you walk in as your party of two, and when you walk out, party of three, everything is different. All
yeah,
your priorities are different, and just getting to be there to witness that transition, and even to kind of bringing the pause and you know seeing that like reflective period it's really special. And I think for me too, it's like they say like the act of giving is selfish in and of itself, because like in the act of giving I'm brought happiness. And I feel like this is one of those things for me where I know the people that I'm, working with obviously get something out of it, but in turn, I really do too. It's something that's just so special, and um, you really walk out of that so different, and
yeah.
just even humbled by the like the strength, and just by the change. I mean, is that true? When you left, did you just feel like, whoa, like everything is different? What were
Yeah,
these things before that seemed so big, and now it's just art,
I
right?
know.
Like.
It was funny too, and we'll start from like the beginning of the day
Mhm.
and go through the whole like all of it. But it is funny to think about, my perception of my concerns about it's like, oh, is it gonna be weird that Marguerite's my friend and then she's gonna be like looking up my vagina? But and John's like, "What's it? Is it gonna be weird to have a doula?" Like,
Yeah,
we've never done any of this before.
right.
And then in the moment, like, you literally don't give a shit,
Yeah.
what is happening. I was like walking around naked, like, ah. Yeah. And then on top of that, afterwards, John, I think it's really important what you said too about the dad having that support because I think we kind of forget what an important role dads
Right.
can have in the birthing process. We kind of almost act like they're not a part of it, and they really are. I think what you said about bringing the vibe is so important because the energy the dad brings is so vital too, if they're nervous and like feeling really uncomfortable, like that energy gets passed off to the mom. And so the doula is just this intermediary blah, that is such a nice kind of pillar of support to have for both the mom and the dad. And it was funny too because John, when you first came over to the house and I was like in my
You're in it.
contractions, yeah, they were I was in it. And he was like, I could tell Marguerite's vibe was immediately like down to business, here to support you. But also at the end, he was just like really um happy with how like seamlessly you were fit into it and just provided this kind of steady positive energy, but it was almost like you were there but you almost like weren't there in a way. It's hard to explain. It's just this like really comforting energy that you brought to it without being like a really intense presence, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that. Thank you so much. I feel like that's the best compliment ever because that's my goal. And again, I feel like too it was so funny. I guess yeah, the best place to start is from the beginning. So like when I came up to your house, I like had parked. I was kind of like looking at my phone real quick, just doing a quick check-in, and John comes up to my window and he's like, "It's happening." And I was like, "Oh, we're doing this." And then he's laughing. He's like, "No, I'm just kidding." And he's like, "She's in the house."
We gotta go to the hospital right
Yeah, he's like, "Let's."
now.
And it was just so funny, and I feel like that was like the perfect kind of just icebreaker for John and I in that moment. And I could tell too, I was like, okay, like I'm sensing some a little bit of like just energy here, like like where can we direct this? And John was super cute too. I was like, the lawn looks awesome. And he's like, yeah, I had to mow the grass for we can't bring the baby home here with an unmowed lawn. And I love that so much because I feel like that's like the conversation with all my friends that I'll have about like our guys or whatever. And it's like, we're getting ready for something and I just see him outside cutting the grass and I'm like, what are we doing?
Yeah,
And
it's so funny. Oh my God, that's rich. Yeah, I started, okay, for starters, I was almost 41 weeks, but in terms of like my birth plan, my main concerns were like not getting induced,
Mhm,
because I know that oftentimes that can like lead to the cascade of interventions, which maybe you can speak to as well.
mhm,
But like my main concerns in terms of like a quote unquote birth plan was like trying to do what I can to avoid induction, and I was willing to sign a waiver, a medical waiver to do that. And as long as like stress tests and everything were okay. And
mhm,
then and that was in the hopes of like having a vaginal birth over a C-section. And so that said, and everyone in my family runs late. My mom had all of us late. So I was just thinking, considering my genetic background and the fact that I'm a first time mom, and a
mhm,
lot of times they often go late, I just want to mentally prepare for the fact that I'm probably going to go really late.
mhm.
And of course, the minute that you mentally prepare for that, you don't. I was only 5 days late,
Yep.
but yeah, I had gotten my cervix checked like the day before that. And so when I started having contractions at 3 a.m. the morning, Thursday morning,
There's money, yeah.
I was like, oh, I'll just take a bath. It's fine. Like, it's not gonna, it's probably just, like false labor or whatever. And then as the day progressed and started getting more intense, and that's when I was talking to you, John was starting to get a little more antsy about like getting the house ready because he was realizing that it might actually be the day. And so he's like mowing the lawn. He is setting up, he calls it the baby mama lounge that he's building in the backyard for by the pool, the little pergola I sent you a picture
Yep.
of. He's like getting the baby mama lounge ready, cleaning out, like cleaning, doing all the dishes. And I'm just in the bedroom, like, oh, oh. And then he came back and he's like, have you been doing this the whole time? I'm like, yes. And I'm like, and he's like, well, maybe we should go to the hospital soon. I'm like, yeah, maybe soon. And then I was talking to you, and you're an hour and a half away.
An hour and a half away,
But
yeah.
I didn't want to make you come and then have it be a false start. And so it ended up being perfect timing that you got there. John got the lawn mowed for
He did,
Artie.
and it looked really great. I mean, he did
Yeah.
a really nice job, so
Right. So then we went to the hospital. So it was 3 in the morning, contractions started,
yeah. And you
steadily increased until you got there. How was what was outside of John pretending that I was like in the middle of labor or active labor, I guess, because I was in the middle of labor.
you were. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. How did you feel when you first got there? Got to
Um,
your house.
I guess I want to say like I felt, I mean, so we talked in the morning. I did like a Whole Foods run and kind of got like my go bag ready. And so when I say like go bag, I like to one just have like a change of comfy clothes for myself, and then I'll bring like some just snacks. So part of that is water. I love water. I feel like you love water. It's something we both love. Like good water. All water is not created equally, but that's for a separate discussion. So yeah, so um no offense to the hospital, but I think we love water so much that it's nice to have like your nice high quality water.
Like all the H2O.
High quality H2O water boy, watch out. And I like get my electrolytes and then just some different snacks from some of the past mamas that I've worked with. Apple juice has been a fan favorite. So getting some like really nice biodynamic organic apple juice. And again, too, it's just like having those things that like are alive, it's really good quality, thinking of it as like fuel where like this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. One of the things in like providing that support is that when like you're gonna be putting your body through something that you want to make sure that you have some like really nourishing healthy things that you can just kind of like keep you going, keep that energy up. And I feel like that's something we don't really talk about as well, is just the physical toll that the whole entire birthing experience, from contractions to push to your labor period, it's a lot of stress and a lot of energy that that mama has to exude. So just making sure, like dates, I feel like we can put a list together, but like dates, peanut butter, mango. You were a really big fan of the dried mango. And then some fun snacks for John and I. Some
And
awesome
the sticks, the
meat
chomp sticks.
sticks, chomp sticks. They're so good. So yeah, so I felt like ready, and then we talked at 12, and um you were like, I'm in the bath, or I'd been in the bath, and you were pausing because at that point I think that it was like all right, the contractions are happening. I need to focus on the contraction, like
Stop
not.
talking.
Yeah, and at that point I was like, all right, like I need to start heading up north. And you were so cute. Like even in that like period, you didn't want to be, I don't want to say like a burden, but you didn't want to burden me. Like with the, being like, oh, this might be a false start. And I'm thinking like, well, I don't care if it's a false start. Like we'll just hang out. Like I haven't seen sweet Vita baby in a while. Like we can just have dinner, and I'll drive back if I need to. And then we caught up again, and you're like, yeah, it's getting intense now. So I think I got to the house like right before 3, and I just felt like, okay, like ready, almost in my like
Yeah.
game face on. Was ready to kind of just feel out like what the vibe was. I could tell John had a little bit of nervous energy, which is totally like normal. And
Yeah, he was like chit chatting.
yeah.
And there's a couple times I had to be like, John,
Yeah,
no chatting during contractions. And I
no.
was like, shh, shh. And he's like, okay, okay. And then, but then I told him that before you got there, and then you got there, and he was like chit chatting with you. I was like, no chit chatting with her either.
No chit chat. He's like, "You want a sandwich? This is a nice
No
tomato."
chit chatting anywhere around me.
No chatting during contraction.
I was
And
like on all fours on Vita's dog bed. I'm like, he's like, Marguerite, you want some water? I was like, yes.
it was too good. Yeah, at that point I was like, all right, we're
We
ready.
probably need to go to the hospital
We
now. And like, I'm waiting as long as I can because I just, whatever. I didn't want to get there early and I just didn't want to be in the hospital the least amount of time possible. But it was perfectly timed
it's
by the
perfect.
time you got there because I'm like, I don't know how much longer I can wait. And I just didn't want the car, if it was
Car ride.
thing and then the car ride. I mean, I had probably at least like four contractions. And at that point, they were coming every 3 minutes and had
Mhm.
been for a while. And they say after an hour, you're supposed to call.
Mhm.
But we waited a few hours. So,
Yeah, and honestly though, I think you timed it perfectly. Like everything really worked out like pretty seamlessly. I mean, by the time we left, we got to the hospital, we figured out like how to get checked in, and what was it, within 15 minutes your water had broke?
it was literally like right when we got there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean it was timed perfectly. And I totally get that too with being in that like pre-labor, and you really want just to be comfortable. And I feel like for you being able to be in your space and like outside of like the joking aside, I mean it was very peaceful. Like you were in the back on the deck, and like just being able, I feel like, to be in your own space gives you that level of like comfort and makes you more at ease. And if anything,
Mhm.
that too is so important for going through what you're gonna do, just being in that like nice headspace. And um
Yeah.
it definitely, I feel like the timing was perfect. You got such a nice 12, 12 and a half hours at home, which is incredible.
Right. And it's funny to think of the beginning of it in the bath. I was like talking to my niece at 3 in the morning and she ended up having, which is the craziest part of it all too, is she ended up having her baby the same day. And she had been having late like contractions and cramping for a few days before, and it's her second baby. So I was assuming that she would definitely have the baby first.
Mhm.
And when I started having cramping and contractions, I was just assuming again, oh, well, it'd be like yours, where it just comes and goes for a few days. And so, like, laughing in the bathtub, chit chatting with her. And then, like, 5 hours later, I'm like, oh, shit.
You're like, this is it.
I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter what anyone else's birthing or labor looks like. Everyone's is completely different.
Yeah.
And anytime you have assumptions about when your due date's going to be, it's probably going to be a different time than you plan for. So, okay, before we dive into how the hospital unfolded, let's talk about, birth planning and
Mhm.
your take on birth plans and dive into mine. And so I wanted to avoid getting induced, which I
Mhm.
said earlier. And so, can you speak a little bit more to how inductions can, in the cascade of interventions, kind
Mhm.
of
Yeah, no,
like
absolutely.
how one leads to the other?
So generally with the art of induction, think of your body as almost like a car, right? Where if you're gonna prime your engine so you can have a smooth drive, with birth, it's almost, think of that like same process, that a lot of the things that lead up to you going into labor are helping prepare you for that next step. So if you can get to a place where you can go into natural labor, or without some of the great things that are now at our disposal to help in the event that your body can't get itself there. Basically what's happening is it's a cascading effect, like you said. So if your body is able to naturally go into that state of labor, there are different things that start kind of just warming up or activating to get you ready for that next phase and for that next phase. So if you are jump starting that car, you're jump starting that process, you're not giving that body the steps or the bandwidth to go through some of those pre-labor things that are going to get you ready. So think of like a contraction, and one of the things that I'm sure can become annoying too is with every contraction, you're getting closer to baby. And so, what does that mean? What is the contraction? The contraction is literally that your muscle contracting to help that baby go further and further down. So, if you're able to go through that, then you're preparing your body for that next stage of being able to have that push birth and the baby having worked their way down enough to actually be able to have that. So if we go into an induction, maybe if you get the vaginal sweep that can kind of help get that engine jump started, you're missing out on some of these steps, and that can lead to more interventions needed at each subsequent stage.
Right. Yeah, and so I didn't do a membrane sweep either, but my main concern with getting like a Pitocin induction is that it basically forces your body into labor, all at one time. So it's not as gradual of a process, and it can be increased, like intensified contractions that are much closer together, and it makes it a lot harder to have a natural birth, which I didn't end up doing, side note. But I was concerned about like putting my body into like a induced birth state that it could lead to like an increased likelihood of inductions. That said, there are interventions,
Yeah.
sorry, which is the case. Like generally speaking, you have a higher likelihood of cesarean section or other interventions if you get induced with Pitocin. But that said, there's obviously many instances when it's needed if you're
Mhm.
going well over your due date. A lot of times they say beyond 42 weeks, most places really don't like you going past. Some places don't like you going past like 40, 41. Depends on the hospital, which is another
Mhm.
thing why it's like so important to research your hospital and really talk to them about your options, because I did do that preemptively when I knew that my family all runs late and I really wanted to try to go into spontaneous labor. I didn't want to get induced, was my main concern. And then in terms of pain management, I was like, I'm going to wait and see what happens. But I
Yeah.
wanted to try to do it naturally. And so, anyways, at my hospital specifically, they would allow you to sign waivers to go beyond 42 weeks
Mhm.
without them inducing you. And they recommend stress testing, which I would have done, of course, because I wanted to make sure that if I did go beyond 42 weeks in order to have spontaneous labor, that the baby's not just in distress, right? So
Right.
there's lots of options. So I just wanted to make sure to share that part, because I think a lot of people, inductions are so normalized, and there is like risks of going beyond 42 weeks, but there's also trajectories that inductions can set you on, that it's good to just be aware of the fact that like you don't have to do an induction a lot of times. Like you can talk to your healthcare providers about going beyond due dates and what other testing they can do to ensure the safety and health of your baby without
Mhm.
doing an induction. So it's totally personal preference, no judgment either way. I just, for me,
Yeah.
wanted to kind of, that was like my big thing that I was hoping to avoid personally. And so I did.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all so important because it goes back to you don't know what you don't know, and so like being prepared and learning these different things, having a good understanding of the family history. If you're in a position where you can talk to, your mom or your significant other's mom, because I feel like that is like a good threshold to just get an understanding.
Mhm.
Um, Also, too, like it is really typical for 42-week gestation period, and I think that in some instances, we 39 weeks, 40 weeks, like it's totally normal to go early. Like you said before, like no pregnancies are the same. So really just making sure that you're aware of like the family history, being aware of what your situation looks like. I think that in some instances the world is so busy, and so sometimes and that falls with like hospitals too, where they can be busy. So I've heard of instances where sometimes the induction is just spoken of like, hey, this is what part of the process is, like at this point we're going to do this. So I think that's where, pausing and then maybe like writing that down, not being afraid to ask another question, or maybe if you aren't comfortable to ask that question where you are, I mean, that's going to be lead me to two things. One, write that down, go home, look into it a little bit more. And then two, if you don't feel comfortable asking that question with that person, that might not be the hospital for you. And I think
Right.
that that's also like an important thing, that if you do want to have a hospital birth, that like you're the customer at that point, and you want to make sure that you're working with someone who you feel like is understanding that like you are the customer, you can ask questions and you can work together, because that's really what that arrangement is. It's not, like you going in and not having any rights or not being able to be involved in that process. It's you're a conscious participant in this experience that you're going to have. So I think that's really important to
Yeah.
make sure you're taking advantage of that period. I think you actually got to go for a tour of the hospital beforehand, right?
Yeah, I did a maternity tour, like a labor and delivery
Mhm.
tour, which was good. And then the particular hospital that I went to had a midwifery care team as well, which I went with that. Generally speaking, midwifery models of birthing tend to be more focused on birthing as a natural process. And they emphasize physiological birth, whereas sometimes working with the OBGYNs or more medically trained people look at it as more as like um, a medical issue that needs to be solved as opposed
Mhm.
to like letting nature take its course. So that said, I felt as though there was a lot of security in it being my first baby and being in a hospital and having access to modern medicine. I'm
Mhm.
big into holistic health, but it doesn't mean that I don't think there's a time and a place for medical interventions. And all of the medical interventions I speak of are all originated based on some type of need. So there's definitely cases where we're happy that they exist, right? So
Mhm.
I think, and even with my approach to like a birth plan and stuff, obviously in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I want it to be as natural as possible. But even speaking with the midwifery team and going through my birth plan with them over and over again, I had certain non negotiables in terms of like post delivery
Mhm.
interventions and that they do with the baby after delivery that I was not going to do. I also knew that like induction was a big thing for me. So making sure that they were willing to work with me in terms of signing a waiver to not get induced and submitting to stress testing was important. But
Mhm.
then beyond that, like I was happy to have access to pain medication should I want it. I didn't
Mhm.
know if that was something I was going to want or not. And I think really the key is remembering that we are the customer and that you shouldn't feel afraid to ask questions. And that a lot of the things that even throughout pregnancy, there was lots of testing that I had been offered, I guess I would say, and you don't have to do all of it. You don't There's also other options like I learned with the glucose tolerance test, you can
Mhm.
test your blood sugar instead. And so just not I think my biggest thing is everyone's entitled to the birth that they want, whether you want to go straight to a C-section or you want no medications whatsoever. I think it's really about being able to collaborate with your healthcare team and make sure that you know that you don't just have to go to the hospital. It's also different on the Vineyard, which is
Right. Yeah.
interesting because there's only one hospital there, and there you do have to get induced or go off island, which is
Mhm.
unfortunate. But yeah, I think just knowing that you really are, in charge of the experience you want to have, and that not everything is mandatory. Most things aren't. There is other options. A lot of times it's just kind of presented as this is the procedure standardly, but if you're willing to work with your healthcare providers and they're willing to work with you, then you can probably create really close to the experience you want. Obviously, there's variables that exist. But so yeah, so um okay, so we left off at going to the hospital. So we got there, water broke. They're like, "Okay, yeah, you're in labor, you can stay." I was like, "Not doing that drive again, honey." Um and so then I spent like another 4 hours. So we got there at 4,
We got
and
there
I
for.
spent another 4 hours in labor. So it was like 18 hours total in labor before I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna need some pain management here. Like we
Yeah.
gotta do something about this because my contractions, I feel, were getting to the point where they were like 30 seconds or a minute apart, and some of them were really long. And
Yes.
speaking of Pitocin, that's what I envisioned it being like if you were induced, like
Yeah.
back to back contractions that were extra long and intense. And so, yeah, at that point, I was kind of like, all right, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this every minute for the next 8 hours. Cause then I was like, all right, I'll wait and see where they say I'm at. And when she was like, all right, 6 centimeters, so it could be about 8 to 12 hours before you get to 10. I was like, oh, honey.
Yeah. Well, because at that point too, we got there after your water broke, you had a check, and it was 4 to 5, 5 being generous. And in that, being generous just means if you had your hand right, then you could stretch to 5. But the actual state was at 4 centimeters, and
Mhm.
um you really weren't progressing. I mean, so maybe there had been one more check, and it was at the changing of the guards, we'll say at 7 o'clock we had the team swap out, and that check was 5, 6 with the stretch.
Yeah.
And
So
I
that was
mean,
like 4 hours.
that was, yeah. And then at that point you're like, wait a second. I mean, you had been going like that, like you said, since 3 a.m.
Mhm.
um and it was a lot. You weren't getting the breaks. I mean,
No
and
breaks.
you weren't getting any breaks. And I want to say your best position was walking around or being like on all fours. Like at that point, like you
Yeah.
couldn't get, there was no
The
rest.
bath was nice, but
The
it was
bath,
like hard to sit down and have a contraction. I could not sit.
you couldn't. And
I
that's tough
had to
too.
pace like a wild animal. Oh my God.
You did, you paced. And I mean, that's a lot. And I think for me being there, I was the most proud in that moment when you're just like, I like, my body's not going to support this for like X more hours. Like, I just need to be able to like chill here and get some like
Mhm.
energy back and be able to kind of like, the things that are ideal that you could do during your contractions.
Yeah.
But Art wanted to get out. He
Yeah.
was.
Well, the thing too that I thought and my fear and my priorities were not getting induced to avoid a cesarean, which
Mhm.
even in the case of a cesarean, there's cases where it's an emergency or it
Right.
needs to happen. And even that I had kind of come to peace with, like, should something go in a way that, I don't foresee now and I have to get a
Mhm.
cesarean section, like that it is what it is, it's like
Right.
it's not what I hope for, but I'm sure a lot of people don't hope for that when
Mhm.
they go in. And so just every birthing experience is beautiful when there's a healthy baby involved. But that
Right.
was just kind of like what I hoped for, was to have a vaginal birth. And my fear, though, with being 6 centimeters, having contractions 1 minute apart for 2 minutes and not having any breaks,
Yeah.
and trying to be stubborn about not getting any pain management, was that I would get to the pushing and have like zero energy
Mhm.
left, which, could have led to a cesarean section itself. And so
Right.
in that case, I feel like when it comes to pain management, it's really just up to you and your birth experience. And for me at that point, I felt like, okay, I would rather be able to get rest for a little bit right
Mhm.
now and have confidence in myself, like pushing through the finish line, literally, than try to like push through the next 8 hours and feel like dead by the time I get there.
Right.
And it was good because even after getting the epidural, which I got like at 8 p.m., so
Mhm.
about 18 hours in, even after that, we got to sleep a little bit, we got to rest, and then I still had to push for 3.5 hours. So
Mhm.
I don't know that I would have been very successful doing that if I hadn't gotten the epidural.
Yeah, I mean, like, so by the time, yeah, by the time you got it, maybe let's say 9 o'clock, and within, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, you were a different person. I mean,
Yeah.
just like the amount of
We
like,
were chit-chatting.
yeah, we were chit
Chit-chatting was
chatting.
allowed again.
Yeah, you're like, hey, good to see you. Uh,
How's how's life? So
yeah,
what's up with you?
what's up with
Anything
you?
else? Yeah.
And we're like, all right, we should nap now. But
Yeah.
I thought that was like to me, I was like, wow, this worked out really well. And I think too, just going back to it being a medical team, the gentleman, the anesthesiologist who came in to give you the epidural was fantastic. And he is, I think, what anyone would say is like the dream person for that job. I felt like he was really informative when he talked about just the application and he talked about the dosage. I really liked that they had like a less is more kind of mentality where you got the lowest dose possible for your weight and height. So he started at like a very low end to see how your body would be receptive to that, which I think is really important too, because a lot of the times I feel like an epi can get a bad rap when it's actually just not administered properly, where it might be put in an incorrect position, or you might get a dose that's too high for what your body can actually like have as a threshold.
Mhm.
And so in that situation, I just think it was so fortunate that he was as skilled as he was, because his application was just incredible, where you were still able to have some type of feeling in your legs. And I think that that's really important too, where it comes to not having kind of that maybe domino effect sometimes of additional intervention that might be needed because of the pain management.
Mhm.
So
The
like
cascade, yeah. Beep, beep, beep.
shout out to Dawn. He did an awesome job. The fact that you
Yeah.
could still have that feeling, I feel
He
like
was
is
there like real quick when I was like, all right, pull the trigger, people.
yeah,
Get it up. I'm like, we got this far, 18 hours, it's a win. Give me the epidural now.
is a win, baby. Yeah, because when
I'm
we
like,
talked about the ladder of
John,
pain, it didn't make sense to start at that second rung because you weren't going to get the sleep, and that was really like,
well, yeah, I had been thinking about the nitrous oxide, but it's like, okay, that helps you, you can put it on. It's
mhm,
like they said, you have to be very actively engaged if you're doing the
right,
nitrous oxide. You have to breathe it in every time you have a contraction. And I'm like, well, that defeats the purpose of trying to sleep.
right.
And so, and I wasn't really into the IV pain management either. That didn't sound like my vibe.
They didn't
So
sell that too well.
he didn't at all. I was like, yeah, I think I'll pass on that. You didn't make that sound very good. Anyways, I'm just gonna get the epidural. Thank you. And so, yeah, he was quick like a bunny in there. And then
He was.
he was in and out, got it done, and we were able to rest until um we
The
just were
third
able to
day.
rest until the delivery, but in between, my labor kind of slowed. And this
Mhm,
is another example of less is more,
right.
where they then did give me like the smallest amount of Pitocin to like
Mhm,
help the labor get back to a normal uh, rhythm.
mhm,
And Whereas like before I really didn't want Pitocin to induce me from nothing. I felt like okay about doing it at that point because I was already in spontaneous labor and my
Right.
body had already been going through contractions for an entire day. So it was just augmenting it rather than
Mhm.
inducing it. And they used like the smallest amount. And it was after I tried fully breaking my water because my water didn't fully rupture when it
Yep.
did break initially. So we kind of tried that first before even a low dose of Pitocin. But then once we did do the low dose of Pitocin, she came back like 2 hours later. She's like, all right, we were all sleeping. She's like, okay, you're 10 centimeters dilated. Are you ready to push now? I'm like, okay.
Really,
And it
that's
was just like the chillest experience ever. And then the pushing was like fun, I have to say. We had like a good rapport going with the team at that point.
it was a strong team, but yeah, like going back to that, I mean, you got like a hit of pit as they call it, and
Right.
that's all your body
Whiff
needed.
a pit. Paula,
Paula,
whiff a pit. I'm like, what?
like Paula, it's 9 o'clock. We're not ready yet.
I'm like, Paula, chill.
Paula,
She
chill.
got swapped out for a new nurse, and I really loved
I loved
anesthesia.
that. I loved that for us.
Yeah,
I
she was
love
the vibe. The new nurse was the vibe. The old
she
nurse was not the vibe.
she was
She
not the
was cool. I liked her crusty, like, massholeness,
best.
but I was like, not in labor and delivery. You're like monitoring my baby's heartbeat. I don't really want you, like, ain't giving you a whiff of fucking pit. She was literally dropping F bombs. I'm like,
I was like,
I
I
think
remember being like, "Is everyone okay with this?" Because I'm not. I was
professionalism is at an all-time low with you, Miss Paula, but like you're lucky that we're all pretty crusty ourselves. Meanwhile, that was right before my epidural, so I was just like, what's happening?
yeah. You're like, "Who is this? What are we
She was
doing?"
like flirting with the anesthesiologist. I'm like, are you drunk or I don't know what's happening right now. But yeah.
So,
Anyways, the
yeah.
new nurse that got swapped in was amazing, and we pretty much luckily had the same team throughout the
Mhm.
majority of my birth because they came in at 7 and then they stayed until 7 a.m. and he was born at just before 5. So the pushing was amazing and funny and like and just really crazy every like 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, how much more can you see down there?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I remember in the beginning when she checked when we first got there and she was like checking something and John was down there. I was like, get out of there. And
Yeah.
then by the end, I'm like, check down there, John. How close is the baby? You like gave zero shits. It was funny because I was talking to someone recently and they're like, I don't think I would want my husband like they're gonna stay up on the top half and I
Yeah.
was like, you're not gonna
You're
care.
not gonna care.
I
Fame.
thought I was gonna care too, but I did not care when it was happening at all. All modesty goes out the window when you're in labor.
I feel like too it like at that point, so yeah, it is so funny. Like they did the like the additional sweep and it was funny. Like the midwife was like, it's like a crochet needle. And they drained like the extra balloon because that was something too where all the contractions that you were having, a baby's head was hitting like that balloon. So think of it as like a water balloon between baby's head and your actual like cervix. So you weren't
Right.
getting that pressure. So having that kind of drained was just it helped give him that extra space, and then getting the hit of pit like you had said, your body was already there. Getting that hit was just like, oh yep, we're doing this, let's get back into it.
Right.
um
Yeah.
After you got the energy break, because even when you got to 10 and then the pushing starts, I mean that's a lot of energy. And when
Yeah.
1:30 in the morning, 1:38 in the morning, you know you got started. And yeah, the pushing's always fun.
Hilarious.
It was
Okay, can
really
we
fun.
talk about two things?
Yes,
Pooping and projectile vomiting.
pooping and projectile vomiting. So I feel like at some point I joked with you like we're gonna see you poop, and when you poop, we know you're pushing right. So
Right.
when
So yeah, basically, I mean, there wasn't any like full blown meltdown poop and
no,
but there was like a little poop here and there.
A little poop.
And remember Marina, the
Yeah.
midwife who was there, she was out at one point, and I was like, when she came back in, that was how I broke the ice. I'm like,
You
oh,
did.
you missed it. I just pooped a little. And she was like, don't worry, I'll do it again for you.
It
And
was so funny.
he was like, okay, okay. And then from there on, they were all, you could tell they like, everyone was chill. It was good, set the tone well.
It
And then the
was.
most hilarious part there of it all was the projectile vomit, too, because I felt like, because I had been drinking so much like water, juice,
Mhm.
ginger ale, and stuff like throughout to give myself energy. And it was every time I was pushing, it was just like sitting. The acid reflux was like sitting
Mhm.
in my throat. And it was so funny because the OBGYN was out of the she was never in the room. She came in the one time to introduce herself, and then you could tell she was like making rounds to check in after I had been pushing for like 2.5 hours.
Yep.
It was like the moment that she came in, I was like mid push. I'm like, I have to throw up. And John like grabbed a trash can, and the midwife was like, "Get
Yep.
out of here!" and like grabbed a bag and shoved it under my face, and I threw up, and I was like, "All right, let's go, keep going, push."
Keep going, baby.
And the
Uh,
OB/GYN was like, "Okay, good job, keep it up, bye."
I'm gonna let you guys keep going in here. I'm out.
He's like, everything's going fine. Okay, okay.
That's that's
But
something too, going back to the like induction, or sometimes having like very high dose of pitocin, that can actually cause some nausea issues, which then can lead to having a drip of Zofran, which is just again like thinking of kind of like the chain reactions of things. So
yeah,
one, like you said, just having a lot of liquids and nowhere for them to go down, so they're coming up. But
yeah,
sometimes the vomiting can be that side effect of that the pitocin. But
yeah. It was
you
wild. And
it
then
was
it was actually perfect because I
it
felt like
was
a second wind after that. I was ready to go. And John was the designated gender revealer.
he was
And I got to pull the baby out,
you
Khloe
did.
Kardashian style. I was like, I need my Khloe moment. And they're all like, okay, lady, chill out. And I pulled him out. And then I was like, John, hello.
It was too
Do you
funny.
mind?
I elbowed
Girl,
him.
boy, alien, fill me in.
So I saw the Artie's fruit there, and I remember like just elbowing John, and I was like, John, what do we have? And he's like, how do I see? And I was like, what do you see down there? I thought it was so cute how like he said like we didn't have a boy, or we didn't have a girl, like he told you, it's Arthur John. Like I thought that was just such a nice.
We have an Arthur.
We have an Arthur John. It was
He
just
was funny throughout too when they were doing random stuff. He's like, "Is that supposed to have
yeah.
bubbles in the IV?" I'm like, "Good job," but they know what they're doing.
He was
But yeah, he was like, "You weren't even mean to me, except for a little bit before the epidural when you were in your shh mode." I was like, "Well, from my perspective, feel like it was very mild. My
yeah.
pre-epidural reprimanding, like, don't talk." And he's like, it's amazing how all the women in the room just the minute he was like all of the staff, the medical staff, because at one point there was like three people in there at a
Mhm.
time plus you, and he's like, you could just tell like Marguerite and the medical staff, every time there was a contraction, all the women are just like, he's like, they like cast their eyes like downward and like didn't make eye contact with you and like went mute. I was like, yeah, they know that's why. They're
He
not supposed to speak during contractions and they know that.
My favorite, like one of the favorite things that he did was he brought the spray bottle, I think, that you have for the cat, and he kept wanting to spray you. Like at any like he was so ready, like at any moment, he just like get the spray bottle and you're like, what do you like get no. Like but he's like
On like jet stream mode too. It's not like a misspring, but I'm like, I don't want you to spray me with that.
They're like, and I think it was me too. I think like the nurse, she was like, "What is that?" And you were like, "For our cat."
I was like, that is for training our dog and our cat to not beg and to jump on the table.
Like,
Oh my God, that's rich. I forgot about that point. Yeah, so all in all, anything I'm missing from the birth story?
no, I mean, honestly, like I think that it was just an incredible team. Like the swap out that happened, like Paula, you were great. We love you, but um they needed you upstairs and we lucked out. We got a really awesome nurse, and I feel like her and Mariana like really like worked well together, and just everyone. It was like very, like you said, just like really seamless and really getting into that groove. Like as a team, because at that point it really is like the push part is when it's the most important for all of us to kind of just be like, okay, like how can we get into rhythm with you, because that's the best way that we're going to be able to provide that physical support. And like you said, by that point, like everything's like thrown out the window. There's no modesty, there's legs on shoulders, there's hands against like butts, and it's just what can we do to
Oil being poured onto the
well,
baby's head coming out. Oh my God.
yeah.
Yeah, it was wild. And then after we only stayed in the hospital one night. They typically have you stay two, and we only stayed one. And I think that's the beauty of being able to stay as close as you can to having like a natural birth. I guess for me was like one of the most important things was just being able to like recover more quickly, was awesome. And so felt great afterwards, and we were able to leave the next day and get home. John had to like mildly harass the hospital staff. He's like, I think we're good. Just one day is fine, right? We're good. All the nurses kept coming in. They're like, we know you guys want to leave early. We get it. And so we
No
left
hard
them.
feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, you want to leave the hospital? We're like, yeah, we do. We just want to like come in here, get her done, and get the hell out. But yeah, I think my biggest takeaways and lessons is just like how amazing our bodies are,
Mhm,
and that every birth story is a success and is so empowering, like no matter how it unfolds for you. And I think really, especially in the hospital, just knowing what your options are and really educating yourself. And I mean, or not, if that's not your thing and you don't really care, then hey, this isn't for you. But if you are, you know, interested in having like a more natural birth or whatnot, and you want to still be in a hospital, just making sure that you educate yourself and
mhm,
research and make sure that the team you're working with is in alignment with you and willing to support what your vision is and be flexible when you change your mind. And that, also not to box yourself in, like just
yeah.
because you think you want a natural birth or you are more holistically minded, it's by no means a failure if you need to get like support or pain
Mhm,
management along the way. And I feel like I made all the best decisions for myself to have like a successful experience I with the way things unfolded. And
mhm,
yeah, I think really just being able to embrace the overlap of holistic approaches with the modern medicine, and also understanding it is still a business. You do still have to like advocate for yourself because every intervention is making money and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of nuance in it. And it was funny too because John was like, "You made me read all these natural birthing books, so I wanted to make sure you were serious about an epidural." And I'm like, "Yeah, when you don't at that point, like, I wasn't gonna change my mind, you know?
yeah.
Like, no, I'm good. I'm gonna get it." But yeah, it's just not boxing yourself in. That there's a lot of beautiful ways that conventional medicine and holistic medicine can work together, but in order for that to be successful, it often takes a lot more like active participation on our
Mhm,
end than many of us either know or care to do. So it just depends on the person and how much you want to participate in the decision making about your own like birthing experience. And
Yeah.
yeah, the biggest asset to me was going in with like very few non-negotiables and like having a
Mhm.
flexible mindset at the same time, researching but also accepting
Yeah.
that I can't control everything.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like that's the best mindset, is just being open to the unknown while still maintaining some of the preferences or just, decisions that you have made, and being able to accept and embrace some of the other things that are available, which is, it's awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm like I said, coming out of there, I was just so proud of you both and so humbled to be part of that experience. I think that the biggest takeaway I had from that was just seeing really the love and support that you and John have for one another, and really, like, for him, doing the work, right? Like reading the books and being there and even understanding like what those preferences were. That to me was just really, really humbling, and I felt fortunate to be able to witness that and really see you both kind of ascend into the roles of mom and dad in that minute. And yeah, Art picked a good pair of parents to help guide him in this next chapter. So, congratulations. And
Yeah,
Artie,
and on the other end of birth, he's been such a cool little baby.
I love
He's
it.
so funny. He's a little old man, and I could tell as soon as I met him, and I've gone to hang out with him in real life now outside of pregnancy. I definitely see how he was the spirit that I was, the energy, and like, oh,
Yeah.
this checks out. Because my pregnancy was so calm, and I just felt like he was a calm soul because even his movements were always like very, didn't feel jerky or
Yeah.
sporadic. They felt very flowing, and it always felt like he was just stretching, and his movements were gentle. And I feel like he has a very gentle spirit. And so, yeah, breastfeeding and all that stuff has been going well. And
So,
I really can't complain about, I mean, the newborn phase, what do? They just sleep and eat and they
sleep.
just cry when they want. I mean, I'm sure I feel really lucky with his temperament so far, like knock on wood. But yeah, it was a beautiful experience overall, and it was definitely so wonderful to have you there. And just like I said, it was really bringing the vibe and just having that sense of support outside of your partner, and it's like this bridge between you and your partner. And
Right.
I will say it was funny a couple times. John was like, oh yeah, I could tell I was kind of like chatty, and then he was like, you would talk to Marguerite, but you kind of like wouldn't really talk to me, just like shh. And he was like, so I felt like it was really nice, just I think a lot of times we forget about the husband's perspective
Yeah.
and what it may feel like for them to have the support of someone else there too, because it probably feels like a lot of pressure for the man to be like, okay, I don't know. I'm obviously never going to go through this. And there's some layer within birthing where when a man's there telling you anything and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you don't know.
Sorry, sweetie. I think it,
Yeah.
like, and too, like, you didn't lose sight of that. Like, anything that he was doing, it was like from that place of love and like his love for you, his wanting to like be of some support. But it's at one point he was like doing like the Lenny touches, like being a little bit like hard with the rubbing, and you were like on all fours, and I remember kind of just like gently touching your back, and you're like, oh, it feels really good. And I saw John, and I was like, John, come here. And I just like swapped out spaces, and I was like, all right, just like very nice, very light, like downward, light touching. And then like he was like, okay, cool, like I can do this. And it's like, all right, like just keep doing it like that. So yeah, like you said, just having that kind of the lady translator there to
Yeah,
to
yeah.
help guide and direct.
The lady translator, it's nice. It's just this buffer, and of course, lots of snacks was a plus. Mango, dried mango, all the things. But yeah, it was amazing having you there, and it was just it like went exceeded my expectations having a doula, and it wasn't. it's something that just felt like it created such a more harmonious experience with it all that I don't think would have been the same without you there. So, so happy that you
Oh,
were.
thank you.
And yeah, for anybody who listens to this and maybe is thinking about having a doula, like what's the best way to get in touch with you about
Follow me on
your
Instagram
business?
at That's the Play and just get in touch with me there. I'm pretty active and yeah, just anything between just during your pregnancy process, during birth, or even after. Um, I'm here. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, that's the play. And I'll tag you in when I post this next week. It's going to be a little bonus episode for everyone. And so, yeah, lots of personal deets in this one. And TMI, but it's fun to TMI sometimes. And so, yes, biggest takeaways are women are fucking amazing. There's a beautiful, harmonious relationship that can exist with holistic and conventional medicine if we choose to look for the nuance in it. And yeah, be your own best advocate because it can really make or break your experience if you choose to be more of an active participant. So,
Yeah.
alrighty. Thanks for being on here, Marguerite. Thanks for being Madula.
Thank you.
All right, bye
All right,
everyone,
bye.
and like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed. Bye, y'all.